I close my eyes and I'm done. And
Ah,
it's younger people's problems. You know what I mean?
I see. The Roland Volt, I'll already be dead method. I understand.
Well, come on. Come on. It's like, in the long run, we're all dead, as you know, as the German saying goes.
Welcome to What's Your Baseline, where you're already dead.
Yep. Welcome to the What's Your Baseline podcast, where we demystify enterprise architecture and business process management.
We're here to bring best practices and lessons learned from our years to your ears, as well as interviewing friends we met along the way on our professional journeys.
My name is Roland Volt, and I'm joined today by my co-host, JM Erlinson. Hey, JM, how are you doing today?
Doing great, Roland. I've had a busy day so far, my goodness, but honestly, I wouldn't have it any other way. I don't like to be idle. You know that feeling where you kind of get antsy, like, ugh, I should be doing something. I can't, what's going on? And I feel like whenever I have these full days, well, they're quite packed. I come out of it like I've eaten a meal of knowledge. I'm excited to share it with everyone today. Roland, how are you doing?
We're definitely different. I wish I
Ah,
had some spare time, and if I would use it riding my motorcycle.
oh
But,
yeah, it's like
you know,
motorcycle riding season coming up right now. I love it. I love
yeah,
it.
but I haven't ridden in months, so that's a little bit sad. But maybe we'll see how it goes. Um, Anyways, otherwise I'm doing fine. I'm looking forward to our recording because what we have today, and I leave it up to you to pronounce his name correctly because you did it in our test drive. But we have to say it, the BPM Oracle on the show
Yes.
because our guest today, he's running, I think, for 2 years in a row or maybe even 3 years in a row, the predictions for BPM
Uh-huh.
trends in the upcoming year. And obviously, I'm super curious what the Oracle will say to us.
So, ladies and gentlemen, our BPM Oracle for the afternoon, Zbigniew. Welcome to our show, Zbigniew. It's a pleasure to have you on What's Your Baseline?
Welcome, thanks for having me, but I'm afraid that you invited the wrong person because most certainly I am not the BPM Oracle. And the BPM tips uh, blog and the BPM skills cycle is actually a little bit older. So the first episode was, I think, in 2016 or so.
Oh,
And the idea behind this was to invite people who are BPM oracles, who know a lot about BPM and understand what do they know about the market, what do they see, how would they describe it, and what they would like to share with others. Because the general idea of my blog is to find people who have great insights, great knowledge, and allow them to share it with others. So this was the idea of this cycle, and I will tell about it a little bit more in a few minutes.
yeah. So now I'm
Oh.
I'm super disappointed because I've been on your magic list just for 2 years, and I'm on page 2 on the bottom. I think I have to work my way up, and maybe
This
change
is
my
how we
name
do it,
to instead of
Roland.
with an A. You know.
We'd introduce him here, and then he'll put you high on the list. That's so
Yeah.
maybe
Well.
not BPM Oracle, BPM facilitator, BPM connection maker. Nonetheless, Zbigniew, welcome to What's Your Baseline. Now, I think people want to know a little bit more about you, so let's go with professional and then personal. So tell us how you got to where you are as a connector of people and ideas in BPM, and a little bit more about who you are, that is the man behind the mask of BPMtips.com.
Okay, so I'm a BPM consultant at BOC Group, the company that is helping organizations improve their processes with a BPM tool called Adonis. So this is tool pretty similar to RSI Graphics. And perhaps you know it also in the US, but we're also offering other tools like Enterprise Architecture Management tool AdoIT and GRC tool called AdoGRC. So this is what we do. I'm mostly involved in process management, but also I help organizations in some other areas. And I'm a consultant at BOC since I think 19 years or so.
Ooh,
For
congratulations.
Yeah, it's a
Wow.
long time, but lots of interesting things to learn. So it was a long time to learn from many great people about various aspects of process management and other things. For some time at BOC Group, I was responsible for support of our free tool called Adonis Community Edition. Now I'm no longer doing it. Well, sometimes I'm supporting people from Poland, but it is used now globally, and I'm doing other things, and I'm supporting educators that are using also the free version of Adonis, Adonis Academy Edition from Poland. Those are dozens of people from universities. This is an important thing because our company is a spin-off from university, from Vienna University to be more precise. So we try to be very, very close to universities wherever we are on every market. And for me, it is very interesting to know so many inspirational people from universities that create great visions, great connections, great ideas, and it is wonderful to learn from them and to share what I learned from them. So I have a pleasure of working with those universities. I also do some trainings for companies, also for universities from time to time. And I am blogging at BPM Tips since a little bit, I think, over 10 years. So this is me. Professionally and personally, I live in Poland. I'm married with one child, and this is and those are the most important things.
Well, there's obviously we have two things that we have somewhat in common, you know. So I worked with Adonis before, believe it or not, you know, at a client, and my son lives in Vienna. So two things, and shout out to Christoph Piller, who is also from Vienna. So maybe three connections in here. But I also heard a little birdie told me that you have a different hobby which involves putting virtual ink on virtual paper. Is that correct? And what can we expect?
Yeah, also um, about different things. I'm working on a book called Practical Business Process Modeling and Analysis. For this book, my colleague BJ Biernatowski invited me to write this book with Jim Steiner. So it should go live pretty soon. So stay tuned. In a few months or so, it should be ready. Jim and BJ are writing the chapters about, let's say, more visionary stuff about measuring the value of business process management, about digital transformation, about AI, and I'm writing about things that I know best, so about process modeling, about BPMN, stuff like that.
Oh, that's exciting. And we're going to look forward to that book alongside the other books, Roland. You can all hold up your obligatory copy of Successful Architecture Implementation
Do I have to? Do I
as
have to? Thanks for forcing me doing this.
as we all get these published authors talking about BPM and putting it out in the community. But let's move to sort of the main thrust of things here. We've heard a little bit from you before this interview, and I think you should introduce it to our audience here about the BPM skills cycle. So, give me a history behind that. What's the idea behind what this cycle is, and why should people pay attention to it?
Sure thing. So maybe just a few words before about, let's say, what led to this cycle. So the story began during my studies at Warsaw School of Economics, where I got a pretty unexpected course. I was learning some things about Oracle, and on this database-oriented topic, I got some small course about process modeling and simulation. For me, it was wow, those boxes, arrows. It is so fascinating. I would like to do these things. So this led me to want to learn more about process management, to dive deeper in this area. For some years, I was not sure whether this is something that can be done. My colleagues told me, no way, this is something that only guys that are doing technical implementations are doing. Nobody else is doing this process modeling stuff. This has no future for, let's say, normal people. But other leg of this story. During studies, I was also active in the student organization called ISEC. It is mostly active in Europe, but not only. I know that it is headquartered in Canada, so perhaps also in the US it is known. And one of the projects that we were doing was the portal of Centrum Wiedzy, Center of Knowledge. So it was like a small Wikipedia for information about business and economy and things like that. So I had a chance to talk to lots of experts, asking them about their best practices, opinions, and asking them to make articles so that we could share it with fellow students. If you start to see some patterns, this is exactly this, and I love sharing knowledge since that time. Interestingly, when I first saw BPMN at BOC Group, my first idea was, oh no, this BPMN is too technical. It is so ugly. Nobody is going to use it. So this is why I told you that I'm more certainly not a BPM oracle, because I know lots of people who are visionaries. For example, our founder, Professor Dimitris Karayanis, is one of such people. When I was beginning my work at BOC, he was describing a future like we have today, and I thought, no way, everything in the cloud, everything without local installations, software as a service? No, how could it be? So I thought that it is a matter of long years or something that will never happen. But as you can see, he was right. So I have a rare gift of not being able to make predictions about the future. So I decided to find people who are better at those predictions and allow them to share this knowledge with others. So I can tell you
Well,
about what I see now, but predictions from me, bad idea.
well, like somebody smarter than me once said, predictions are hard, especially when the future is involved. So I'll give you a
Yes.
pass.
Uh-huh.
But hey, obviously, well, I don't know if it's obvious, but at least in my circles, with me, you're obviously well known for your BPMN skills questionnaire, and then obviously the very interesting answers. And obviously we will link to those in the show notes if you want to read the full thing. But have you seen? And I think it's very interesting. I'm pretty sure you're sitting together with those uh, luminaries, over a cup of coffee, and you have your plaid jacket on, the one with the elbow patches and all that type of stuff. Smoking a pipe and drinking your coffee and having those conversations with those people. Um, so first of all, is that true? Does it really work that way? And why haven't I been invited to the coffee? Just saying. But the other thing is, can you give us a little rundown, of the latest BPMN skills that you assembled for 2025? And I will not ask how good those predictions in the past were, so we can skip that.
Sure thing. So, um, generally, as I told you, the first edition of the BPM skills was in 2016, and now the current latest version of the post was actually two posts because there were so many people answering the question. And now to answer your question about whether there is an A list and B list, no, there is no list like that. I just have a limit. It may sound funny, but for each post I prepare graphics in Canva, and experience shows that it is pretty hard to make good-looking graphics with more than 20 people. I just want their faces to be visible, so I don't make posts with, let's say, 30 people. I try to split it also to give them better visibility. And this year I started with, let's say, a pretty small list of people I know well for many years who participated in the posts for quite some time. And for the second part, I tried to go broader to invite some people I don't know that well, or I did not have a chance to invite yet. So I was very happy that so many people answered, and I got so many great quotes. The interesting thing is that obviously, normally when you meet with some person, when you during a conference meet some inspiring people, you have a chance to ask them for a coffee, like Haneke told about those virtual coffees. So you can ask this people many questions. Sometimes you have a chance to talk with those experts live. For example, I have a pleasure of working with my colleagues from different vendors at a group called BPMN MyWeek, Model Interchange Working Group. So this gives a wonderful opportunities to sometimes meet those people in person, to talk to them, to learn more about people who actually wrote the BPM specification. So this is very, very inspiring. But for most people from the BPM skills, I don't know them in person. And I'm just trying to make a virtual coffee experience so that the reader has a chance similar to how they would not only invite for a coffee one expert and listen to what they have to say, but 20 plus experts. What I think is especially valuable is that there are lots of perspectives. So I know that sometimes they may be contradicting, but for me it is very enriching because I can hear what those people have to say. And I would say that each of those people has lots of experience, they have great insights. So for me, it wonderfully connects and wonderfully enriches. So of course, we don't have a chance, unfortunately, to discuss in details everything that they said. I just picked several, but I would encourage the listeners to just go to the website and read everything that people had a chance to write, because those are great answers. So as I will just mention few very, very small parts, because if you would to read everything from this edition and the past editions, it would be a small book, because sometimes the answers are really, really long. So what I asked as a first question this year is how the megatrends like climate change, demographic shift, digital technologies, AI impact BPM, and how does process management help organizations adapt to this new reality? So as you can see, this is a little bit broader question, and I got so many wonderful answers. So just few little excerpts from those answers. First, from Professor van der Aalst, and he states that organizations need to rethink how they design, manage, and optimize their processes. Again, one sentence and gives a lot to think. Also, he mentions something very, very, very important, in my opinion, that we need to make the processes energy efficient and environmentally friendly. This is, I would say, especially important now in the age of AI, because it is very easy to throw lots of resources and have the process run, to make the automation run. But we should be also aware that, well, this is maybe free in terms of money, but it is not free in terms of our impact on the planet. So we should be also thinking about how our implementations of automations are impacting the whole planet, the whole world. Also, he mentions that there is a limited workforce in their developed countries, and we need to think of some ways to retain knowledge and also to be able to organize our processes in such a way that we can do the same with less people. Not because we want to fire people, because it would be very, very short-sighted, but because we simply don't have people, because they are retiring, or they can no longer work. So as you can see, few sentences and lots of inspiration. Also, what I think is also very, very interesting is the quote from Scott Francis, that currently we have, let's say, a little bit chaotic situation, and he says that processes are a key organizing principle that can make order out of chaos. Processes define who participates and when, and that we cannot think that, oh no, this is something that AI can do, because AI is just kind of automation, and potentially anything can be automated if we are clever enough. Again, good approach to the AI. Not everything can be done with AI, and not, no, AI cannot do this, but I would say rather pragmatic approach, and thinking about, again, processes as a driver of value, a thing that organizes stuff, that arranges stuff. So lots of inspiring things.
Yeah, I hear two topics that I wanted to just dig in on, and maybe you were reflecting on these as well. One is on the automation and its effect on the environment, and the second is on the chaos you just talked about. I actually had an opportunity to sit in a panel with a really exciting group of AI thought leaders. And one of them brought up a really interesting point that I hadn't thought about before, which is that despite the efficiency gains we'll see with emerging technology on improving performance of the chips that power our AI, we are barely even keeping up with the increased expectations and demands of our leaders in the AI space. Meaning that for every unit of power we save, we expect more than 1 unit power of capacity. So we're actually, despite technology innovations, losing the environmental race because of the expectations. And I feel like this digs a little bit into things like ethical AI or ethical automation or things like that. I'm first and foremost, let's ask your perspective on that. Where do you see this going based on what you've seen, based on what you're hearing, in terms of companies' responses to this kind of challenge that they're facing in the public perception and in the reality of our world?
This is a great question. As I told you, I'm not a great visionary, so I could only say what I see and what I see from the past, because this is pretty fixed, I would say. So perhaps you recall that in the 1960s there were all those predictions about how the automations, how the advances of technology will make us make lots of free time, how we'll be working perhaps 4 hours a day, because everything else will be automated, and we'll need to break a sweat because everything else will be done. But somehow it turned out that the automations made our life easier, made us more productive, but somehow the new work popped up. Because we can do more things, we are expected to do more things. I would also say that if our customers expect, because some other companies, some other services are offering them more, they also want more from us. So if we say, no, we are just limiting to the bare minimum, to the baseline that we currently offer, and we want to be very eco-friendly, it will be very, very hard to convince people that we are not giving you some extra possibilities that you may expect. Some of those things may be things that they really need. Some of the things maybe they just expect because others are giving them. But it is not easy thing, I am afraid, to somehow convince, to somehow balance the expectations from the customers and being eco-friendly. So this is super, super, super complex. To some extent, it is mentioned by, I think Hanneke mentioned it, in CSRD mentioned about processes. Hanneke, I will return to her in a second. People could also hear her in the episode, I think 83, I guess.
Yeah, we had her on the show. So greetings from this point of the world right now, when you listen to it, Hanneke. But I found it really interesting, that whole topic. And we could do a full episode about it because, well, how did that automation in the 60s and 70s work out? I remember those conversations. I was a kid, reading the news, and they said, oh no, we all get unemployed, and everything at Volkswagen will be super automated and nobody will have work and whatnot. It's a very interesting YouTube channel that I will link, a Swedish lawyer who does social topic videos. Either way, you might agree or not agree with that, but I think he does a good analysis, because I think there's a lot of bullshit jobs that are out there, where people shuffle paper left and right and are part of a process that you really wouldn't use. But hey, then you can't fire them, or you don't want to, or maybe you do. I don't know. Whatever happens in this country where I am right now. But I think one constant that we see is it creates chaos, right? So, and I don't want to get too political here, but when we think about the current trade wars, and all the organizations, be it stateside or elsewhere, need to adjust, right, and figure out, well, how do we do this? I see process management as underutilized, maybe too slow. So what is your opinion on these topics? Changes, bullshit jobs, chaos, the perception of BPM.
Great question. So For me, it reminds me again two answers from people who participated in this post. One from Mirko Kloppenburg, which we have a chance to participate in his podcast with about your book. So very very good episode, worth listening to. And he said that BPM allows you to turn any strategy into reality, and it works for responding to changing environment. So this is very important. I would say that BPM is not seen as something super hot, super interesting. So people are more eager to discover new tools, new toys, new shiny objects, but don't think about aspects like value, processes, because they are not, let's say, sexy. They are just boring stuff, however, which allows you to transform strategy into reality. So this is an important thing, that processes allow you to understand better and navigate chaos better. And second thing about those globalizations or trade wars, this is something that also, if you're flexible with BPM, you can handle this better. Of course, chaos is, well, chaotic, but this is what can help us.
Oh, definitely. Yeah, it definitely does. I'm still, maybe it's just me and my perception of the world. The maturity in process management is still low, relatively. It's higher than in IT architecture, but I don't want to go down that path because that brings me to my prediction that I don't want to have repeated here. But I think it's still low, and people rather shoot from the hip. Was it ready, shoot, aim? And do something instead of just thinking through and say, okay, hey, let's take a half a day and think through this and see what our options are and what we intend to do.
Part of the thing I think here, and this is where maybe Roland and I are contributing to your BPM tips tacitly here, but I feel like, Roland, when you say shooting from the hip, I worry that a lot of senior leaders aren't BPM enabled. And so that the knowledge and acceptance of BPM as a practice is at a level low enough that the doers are not getting the message through to the deciders. And so the deciders say, we want something. The doers say, okay, well, here's how we can do it. And here's the framework with which we would use to achieve this. And the deciders go, yeah, whatever you want. Like, I'm not going to make this a standardized practice. I want to pull this to the fore, but you can use your own methods, guys.
But JM, didn't I just approve the subscription to AI for you? Why isn't it done?
Exactly. But we talked about in a previous episode, like the idea of having like an MBA for AI, but like, I feel like an MBA for BPM, it would also be a handy tool, particularly in very heavily processized organizations. Like, that conversation, I feel, isn't happening in the boardroom. And not that it has to all the time, but what a handy tool that would be in our tool belt if more organizations saw that as a top-down capability the organization needed to embrace change. So I want to turn it back to our audience, because we spent some time talking about the first layer of sort of the trends for BPM skills for 2025. I wanted to ask the question that Zbigniew asked his people to you. So think about, what is the impact of global megatrends such as climate change, demographic shifts, digital technologies, AI on BPM on your organization? And how do you see process management helping you and your organization to adapt to this new reality? How would you answer this question? We'll leave you for a moment to think about that and come back with our second section, more with our friend Zbigniew.
And welcome back. Awesome conversation so far. But now we do something that I'm scared about for weeks now, since I saw the first outline of our little cheat sheet that we have here, because we're gonna switch roles. So now our guest becomes the Grand Inquisitor, and he has prepared a couple of questions for us that hopefully JM can answer very well, and I just go and grab a coffee in between. But
I
having said
already have a
that,
coffee, my friend. I have a
yeah,
coffee
well,
with marshmallows in it. So I'm ready to go for these questions.
So, Roland, you are so kind to answer my, let's say, easy questions from the BPM skills about hot BPM skills. So, I would recommend to everyone to also read your answers. But for this part, I would like to ask you, how do you see currently the state? So, I would say that we live in pretty interesting times for BPM practitioners. For sometimes every several years, we had this trend of, oh, BPM is dead, it's no longer relevant, why should we care? But now we have automation is everywhere. We are talking about processes, about business orchestration. There is this new BOT acronym. We are thinking about how AI can be used. Recently, a few days ago, there was this Shopify CEO manifest about very, very broad AI usage. And how do you see it? What does it mean for the work as such and for BPM? How do you
yeah.
see those changes?
So I've seen those trends that you mentioned, right? Obviously. So look at the color of my beard. I've been around the block a little bit. So I've seen the different changes in definition, what BPM is, from modeling through the actual management discipline to automation and all that stuff. And I would assume that I'm qualified to see trends. And the trends is, as we like to say in Germany, what is the next pig that will be chased through the village? Right? So it's that hot trend. Everybody jumps on it. There's a lot of hype and whatnot. But when you let the pig leave the village and you just have a look and say, oh, what actually happened? You will see a couple of things. First, there's a lot of hype. Right. Now everything needs to be AI enabled, AI first, whatever, AI. Right. Well, that's an episode in itself. I don't believe that we will see the Terminator scenario, but I also don't believe that we will the scenario where somebody just presses a button and the business analyst grabs a coffee and gets his analysis being delivered on a silver platter. What I see is AI is a different form of automation. And I think, to answer your question, I think process management is definitely needed when you think about the process lifecycle, from big idea to solution design to implementation to execution to analysis. When you think about those 5 phases, well, you need to understand all 5. So even with AI, that hasn't changed. But the way how you automate, the way how you optimize your processes, maybe even the gains that you get from that optimization, that might be different.
I want to add on top of that, Roland, because I think you brought up a really good point. That AI is just a different form of automation. But the big difference I see here is how effectively they've been able to snake oil salesmen a lot of the underlying technologies and like sort of hand wave that away. Because in previous levels of automation, whether it was very physical automation or whether or not it was digital automation, but you could see and understand it if you were somebody who really does coding, for the first time in my life, there are very few people who understand the underlying process by which an AI actually chooses to automate process. And that's very scary. People say it's magic. They're like, oh, don't worry. Like you just develop an AI application and the AI will make decisions. And as we move towards a future of agentic, it will improve itself. But how is it doing that? What decision criteria by which you are informing it? They hand wave that away. That's the scary and honestly, like the governance rails problems like that's what sets off alarm bells. So in some ways, if I would say from a trend perspective, BPM is being tacitly devalued and its worth is tacitly skyrocketing. And that gap is something we can address, right?
I think it changes a little bit. I think the underlying promise, how do we get better and how do we make it better and how we measure that it got better, I think that stays the same. I think the qualitative difference between AI automation and traditional automation is that in the past, you went and a human defined the algorithm, defined the rules. Oh, if you have an insurance and the driver is male, well, a little bit higher. If he's under 25, significantly higher. If he has a dog, well, then you get a discount, whatever, right? So there's some human coming up with that set of rules. I think the qualitative difference and I love those chess AI examples. The qualitative difference is with an AI is you let them figure it out by itself, right? So you don't give them the rule, but the machine learns and comes up with variations of that rule set by itself. And I think the big challenge is, and I saw that, Sam Friedman and Bill Gates and leaders in that space signed a petition where they said, yep, it's very important to have some rules around it because there can be negative impacts if the machine says, oh, yeah, we want to solve the climate change problem. Oh, humans produce a lot of nasty stuff in the air. Let's just get rid of the humans and everything is fine.
It would be, well, it would bring the desired result, but I would say that it would not be what we would expect. So, the next question, you touched several very, very interesting topics. Also, it reminds me of great answers that we got. So, one of the answers that we got was from Professor Mahendravati, and she said that what we should also think about is to prioritize ethical considerations, not to think what will earn us a lot of money, but what will be the impact of what we do. So you said about the bias of the decisions about AI. To some extent, I would say that, well, Europe has a lot more regulations than the US, but some of them seem to have some sense. For example, GDPR has not only things about privacy, but also about that the algorithms should be, well, but the companies that are using algorithms should be able to say why was certain decision taken. I think it was from the US. I think you're one of the bosses of the Federal Reserve that didn't get the credit because the algorithm decided that since he's from the public administration, he's very, very, his credit scoring is very poor. So obviously, someone writes those algorithms, but if we have algorithms that create algorithms, we have absolutely no way of saying how fair they are. And if we have bias, then we have a huge problem. So I'm wondering, if we want to make sure that all those automations, all those things really make sense, I would say AI is pretty complex. So do you think we should go broad, or do you think we should have some small set of experts who would be deciding about stuff and doing it? Well, for first approach, some time ago I had a chance to have an interview with Emil Kelly, and he said something very, very bright, that if you have 450 employees, then you have 450 process analysts. So he was supporting the idea that everyone can be process analyst if we give them some skills and they know their job and they can come up with great insights. But on the other hand, maybe in your book, you wrote wonderful things about BPM Center of Excellence. It was super, super interesting. I especially love the matrix about the roles that process architects can have, whether they are just, let's say, guardians of the methodology, or they are, let's say, partners about implementing change. So how do you think it should work? Could it be a part of what BPM Center of Excellence does, all those automations and AI, or perhaps do you think it should be broader? Everyone does it by themselves, or maybe some mix? How do you see it?
Well, if I can just briefly weigh on that quote, because I like it, but I want to finish the quote. Because if you have 450 employees, you have 450 process analysts. But if you have 450 cooks, you don't have dinner. So the truth is that you need to stage how knowledge is applied. You need to have shepherding and governance, enablement and rationalization. This is a process of process management. And I feel like shotgunning by letting everyone contribute is is kind of like it's a false promise, because a lot of that needs to be moderated. Now, allowing everyone to feel bought in by listening to them, heck yes, that's what I want. But there's staging that needs to go into that. Otherwise, you got a big mess and somebody's got to clean it up.
Yeah. If I can chime in, so obviously I want to answer your question about the matrix, um, but maybe that's a global mega trend for the next survey that you do. I have the feeling that in these times, and yes, the country that I'm from currently is steering the pot. I think we're in a process where we renegotiate how societies work. We renegotiate who's our friend, who's our foe. We renegotiate um, voluntarily or not, who do we want to deal with and who don't we? But what happens is, and now coming back to your question, I think that architects in general are needed here. Somebody needs to see through this and say, "Oh, hold on, this is not a great idea what you intend to do." But maybe for those of you who haven't seen the graphic, and I will put it in the show notes. When you think about it, it's two axes that I laid out. One is the degree of contribution, the details that you will, right? On the other axis. So I came up with a 2x2, right? So you have for a low degree of contribution and a more generic statement on specificity, hard word, you have those methodology gurus, right? The people who basically ran the problems in the past, the shows. And then you have on the other side, low contribution or individual contribution, but very, very detailed, is all those specialists, right? The Salesforce architect, whatever. And then on the upper two boxes, you do have in the upper left, so very broad but very generic. High contribution is the strategic advisor. And then the upper right-hand corner, you have the transformation agent, right? I think, to answer your question, it's the upper two that are more important in these times when we renegotiate everything. Does it really matter if your BPMN, no pun intended, is not 100% perfect to the spec and you use the non-interrupting intermediate event gateway incorrectly? I don't think so, right? You can clean up later. But I think it's more important to see, okay, what do we see? How does that affect us in our organization? What impact does it have on our products, on our customers, on our livelihood, on our internal organization, yada, 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 and come up with something that is doable, ensures the survival of the organization, and adds the benefit that you want to bring to the overall game.
Mm-hmm. I also want to weigh in one last time, Zbigniew, on the regulation question, because I think that's something people are asking about. And then we'll probably take it out to a break. But, one of the things I really like about regulation, it's weird to say that, but is that it's kind of a tacit agreement. When you all come together and you are beholden to regulation, and despite your all the lobbyists you may have employed or all the influence you've peddled, there is something signed into law, then every company kind of has to agree to that. And in doing so, you standardize in some ways. You standardize on what the expectations of privacy are, so GDPR and personal data. You standardize on what the expectations of ethics are, so the guidelines on AI development. You standardize on a few on operational resilience. How you expect organizations to be able to respond to crises. That's what DORA and CPS 230 are about. That's in some ways a good thing for everyone, because these are not trying to establish competitive advantages. They're trying to establish baseline capabilities that are required for companies to ethically and sustainably operate in a very, very weird world right now. And I like that. And I wanted to turn that back to our audience, because tell me what you think about all the obligations that are being placed on organizations, the evolving chaos of our world, the ways in which our technology evolves and pushes us forward. How do you handle the pace of change? How does your organization handle that? What sort of leadership initiatives are being put forward to bring people together around that sort of change And how is it being disseminated across the organization, evangelized, enabled in the people who execute process? And is it effective? Or do you find yourselves constantly behind the eight ball? And how might process help? Let's leave you for a moment for your final thoughts, and as we move into our last thoughts and a conclusion for the episode.
And welcome back. So that is obviously very interesting, and it feels a little bit awkward to being interviewed on your own show. So, but hey, thanks for playing that role. You learn something every day. But maybe a couple of thoughts from you. Not your experience of asking us questions, but how do you see that situation, and who do you think we should give a shout out to helping, mitigating all the stuff that we just discussed?
Okay, so when you were answering and told about getting people involved but avoiding chaos, I thought about a great example from Poland. We have the company called InPost. They are they're a very innovative logistic company that is doing some parcel services in Poland and many other European countries. And what they did, there is a great process management team run by Agata Milcarek, and she does some wonderful things with her team. So she makes the order of process management, but also links it with going broad. And how does she do it? So they do not only BPM, but also they have automation, AI, and to make it visible to the company, they used something pretty innovative. So they had something like internal hackathon called RPA and AI Speedrun, and they were automating the process in 24 hours using UiPath. So this was a very interesting way to show people that we can create something that brings value, but with the usage of specific skills, with specific tools, and with the guidance of people from the Center of Excellence. So this was very inspiring. I can share the link to the video that is also subtitled in English.
Yeah. Oh, hey, that sounds like a future episode of this podcast here. So I will definitely have a look. We definitely will put the link in the show notes to send it. But speaking of show notes, obviously one of the biggest questions that we get is, well, that was very interesting. How can I reach our guest? So how can people reach you?
The easiest way is to go to bpmtips.com, and then you will find all the posts, all the answers, and contact details for me.
I love it. And that's a call to action for everyone to visit us in our various web spaces. So if you like what you heard today, go to whatsyourbaseline.com, leave us a comment or send us an email at hello@whatsyourbaseline.com. Visit us on LinkedIn, like this post, share this with your friends. We'd love to get more folks listening to what we do, loving what we do, everything in between. We're just happy to have you here joining us on our journey today. And for this episode specifically, you can go to whatsyourbaseline.com/episode 89. But until we see you again, friends, I've been J.M. Erlinson.
Zbigniew.
My name is Stu, and for the foreseeable future will be Roland Volt.
And we will see you in the next one.